Guys, it's TheFrXion here, Tiger Tank 1-2, I mean, call me, I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks, where we're today reviewing the WZ-121FT. This is a Chinese Tier 8 premium tank destroyer, and it's probably one of the best Tier 8 premium tank destroyers in the game. Now, first and foremost, I wanted to thank all of you for allowing me to reach my big milestone, which is 1,000 subscribers. We've just managed to hit that goal a couple of days ago, and I want to thank you guys personally, guys and girls. There are some women who are actually subscribed to this channel. At least statistically speaking, they said something along the lines of 3%. So guys and girls, thank you very much for subscribing to my channel and for watching my content. It's been a very interesting 10 years, and now I'm going to make a special. Hopefully a special is going to be good, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. But back on task, WZ-121FT. Now this tank is a pretty damn powerful Tier 8 premium tank destroyer. It's a tank that doesn't have a turret, so it's not going to be the same as the SU-130PM or the Scorpion G, but it has its own little niche things that make this tank very, very powerful. First and foremost, you have a 122mm gun. That's a caliber you see often when you're playing Chinese tanks. 122mm gun, 440 alpha damage for the AP and the heat shell, and 530 for the high explosive shell. Now, what's really interesting about the shell types on this gun right now is that the AP shell and the heat shell both have some very nice shell velocity. 1,000 meters per second for the AP heat and the high explosive shell. 61mm of penetration with the high explosive shell is not the best though, but I think you can still make it work on certain targets, for example, another Scorpion G that you can hit from very far away. Now, the AP shell, which is the main shell I'm using most of the time, is quite competitive with 248mm of penetration, at least at Tier 8, but if you compare it to some other vehicles, for example, the Concealment, the Tier 8 French premium tank destroyer, it's at 260mm penetration. That's with APCR as well. So the shell velocity is going to be even better on the Concealment 105. But it's very different because this tank is not supposed to be this very good long-range sniper. That's never what this tank was intended to be. But it was much more intended to be a very versatile tank destroyer that can actually be used in close, medium, and sometimes even long-range combat. So 310mm of penetration with the heat shell, you should not have too many problems going through Tier 9, even Tier 10 tanks. And the rate of fire is probably what makes this tank. Now keep in mind, I'm using Brothers in Arms, I'm using gun rammer, I am using food, improved combat ration, which I will take out for a second, but I've actually been using improved combat ration on this tank just to 3-mark this vehicle because I want to 3-mark this tank. You can still see that the DPM on this vehicle is fairly high at 3,300 and actually I just switched the places around. Let me change this real fast, put the fire extinguisher on, but doesn't change that much. The average damage is per minute at 3,247. That's pretty damn high if you ask me. Rate of fire of 7.38 rounds per minute, and yeah, that means 8-second reload time. You can make it even better with the premium consumable as I've shown you, and you can make it better with a directive. You can also make it better with bond equipment if you have that lying around. So that's really nice. And the gun traverse, on the other hand, is also quite nice. Even though you only have like a 20-degree arc, 10 to the left, 10 to the right, you still have 46.93 degrees per second, so it's not going to take very long for you to switch over and shoot the tank when it's in the same gun arc. The gun arc, though, is quite lacking. 10 degrees to the left, 10 degrees to the right means you'll constantly have to move your hull to be able to line up a shot. Keep that in mind, it's very important. 6 degrees of gun depression for a Chinese tank, I think that's basically average. Means that this tank is not very large. Its profile is quite low, so 6 degrees shouldn't be too much of a problem, and you have 15 degrees of gun elevation, which should be good enough. Now, The aim time is one of the issues with this tank, one of the main issues for me personally. 2.59 seconds, even with enhanced gun laying drive and brothers in arms. Now, if you don't have enhanced gun laying drive on this one, and you are using a field modification which decreases the dispersion, the issue is it would go up all the way almost to 3 seconds for a fully aimed in reticle. I don't really like that. I want to be faster, so I actually did decide to put on enhanced gun laying drive 1. Now what you can actually do is you can move that over to the gun rammer, which means you'll lack kind of the DPM. You're gonna lose a little bit of DPM because it's not in the firepower slot, but you're going to have better aim time by just a little bit. So I think it's not really worth it. I've just seen the numbers, so I'm just going to keep that in there, get me like 50 DPM more in that. But I still think the gun itself, this is like the main thing why people play this tank. The gun is really, really good. The aim time is not that great, but you can work with it. And the dispersion actually isn't too bad either if you use the right equipment. I'm using right here improved aiming. I am using the field modification for it as well. Right here, parallax adjustment. And this, with brothers in arms, allows me to have a dispersion of 0.32. Now with food, that's going to go down to 0.31, and I think this is going to make this tank very versatile at long ranges. Moving on to survivability, this tank has 120 millimeters of frontal armor, 80 on the side, 45 at the rear, and once again, this is really, really good for a tier 8 premium tank destroyer. This armor at the front will bounce quite a few shots because of the very superb angling you have on it. The lower plate obviously is going to be a weak spot there, but there is no real weak spot on top of the tank. Now 1100 HP is not going to get you very far if you get hit from the side, so you still have to be cautious when you're playing this tank, and the armor should still be only like a final last resort where you have to get shot and you have to get shot at the front, because if you get shot at the side, it's not going to be able to survive a lot of shots. Seems to me that it's very similar to the SU-122-44. I just don't really see where it is in my garage right now, but I do have the SU-122-44, and that's like the exact same playstyle. You can play aggressively with it, but you have to keep in mind that the angling is going to be essential for you to bounce shots. Moving on to the top speed, 50 kph, specific power to weight is 15.85 horsepower per ton. You can definitely work with that, but the issue is just it takes a while to speed up. You can use a turbo, but you'd have to forego one of the equipment pieces here, and I want to do max amount of damage with this tank, so I don't really care too much about increasing the mobility or the acceleration further, because I think it's just decent enough. Also, the traverse speed is not that bad, 44.83. You can see I am getting a little bit of a malice by using reinforced suspension modification, but it's still fast enough and it's going to allow you to turn around. Now, why did I actually change the field modification that I usually pick, which is lightweight suspension? Now, the interesting part is if you go for lightweight suspension, you're going to have 49.54 degrees per second traverse speed on the tracks, but the issue is that you're going to have some terrible ground stats. You don't see them in World of Tanks, but if you use Tanks GG, you can actually see how bad the ground stats are when you're driving this vehicle. So I actually decided to go against it because the ground stats are much better, and I really like the tank the way it is currently. Concealment wise, this tank is fairly well concealed. It's a tank destroyer, and you can see in stationary, it's like 42.17% concealed, 26.9 when on the move, and when you fire, you obviously lose a lot of the concealment right there. But spotting wise as well, 404 meters, that is with the final field modification that gives you the additional view range plus 2%. Now, the issue for me is just that this tank doesn't have decent base view range. We don't really see the base view range. Vehicle details, what is the base view range? 404 is the base view range we have right now, but I don't exactly know the base view range without the crew. I think it's somewhere along the lines of 300, maybe 380 or 370. It's not that great. If you want to spot for yourself, you really have to invest into some equipment or into crew. I'm happy with 400 meters. If it comes down to it, I'll have enough view range for myself. So moving on to equipment, what would I kind of tell you to pick? Well, I went with improved aiming. I want to have the best accuracy. This tank for me is basically the one tank I'm going to be playing even in close quarter combat, so it needs to be good at medium to long ranges and sometimes in close quarter combat as well. So I want to have the gun rammer for max DPM. I want to have the enhanced gun lane drive to aim in quicker because it takes forever and you cannot like really get it down from there. You could use improved ventilations to improve all the other characteristics as well, but I thought that it doesn't help me enough, especially if I'm using the premium consumable. It actually just is completely enough if I use enhanced gun lane drive. I have improved aiming to get the dispersion down because I've noticed that this tank is sometimes inaccurate at longer distances. But if you don't care too much about that, and you don't care about long aim time, and you try to play this tank as a long-range sniper, well, you can probably go with improved ventilation, and you could probably go with the improved aiming, put away with enhanced gun lane drive if that isn't really something you care about. Other than that, that's kind of the loadout that has been working out for me the best. I also have a directive on. This is gives me the skill of snapshot, which does improve my it improves my dispersion values when I turn the tank. I know it doesn't have a turret, but it still improves the dispersion values when you turn a tank. I've seen it on Tanks GG, so I have put that on to decrease the dispersion values when I'm playing this tank, when I'm trying to shoot something close up. So kind of important to me. Now obviously if you're playing this tank close up, you don't need the enhanced gun lane drive because you're going to be close enough so that you don't have to aim in like all that drastically. But because this tank it has decent armor, you still have to be cautious with it because you don't want to be too close to them, and then the armor is not going to work anymore because they'll be able to hit your lower plate, and you never want to face several opponents at once. In the replays that I'm going to show you guys, you'll see how well this tank can do at longer distances, in close quarter combat, and even medium range fights, because this tank is very versatile and it has a lot of very good factors to it that, for example, the TheFrXion S1 just cannot benefit from because it has to go into the siege mode. And I think that's why this is such a nice tank. Now talking about the field modifications, I went for reinforced suspension. As I mentioned, the ground stats are a lot better. Parallax adjustment to decrease the aim circle size. Right angle periscope to give me better view range. And finally I went with the final slot, which is scouting, but I'm not really intending to use it except if I actually go for improved ventilations, which could be the case. But either way, I'd say we jump into some gameplay and we'll figure out how well the WZ-121G FT stacks up in World of Tanks and if it is worth picking up when it ever comes on sale. Okay, so let's jump into some gameplay. Hey guys, we're going to be taking a look at two gameplays today, and the first one is where I want to show off the armor on the WZ-121G FT and why I think that this tank does have some very nice special little features that some other tanks don't have. For example, the Kanonjagdpanzer 105, who just got slammed by 3 tanks and is now out of the game because our Burask has taken a very aggressive spot where he can actually spot anything that is going to cross into the tower. So a very nice beginning for us and our team, but we're going to be running into a couple of problems in this gameplay. This is a game that I really think shows off how difficult it can be to hold a flank, but it's still possible to regain the flank if you have a little bit of communication and a bit of street smarts when you're playing the game. Now, this is a pretty interesting gameplay, just so you know, but we're just sitting here in the middle and we are not really going anywhere. At first I was thinking about heading down the 0 line to help out the other tanks that were going to assist with the tracks, but I decided against it because I was worried that I do not have enough hit points or gun depression to be able to help my team over there. unfortunately right there, we hit the ELC even 90 and we only do 0 damage but get a critical hit. Those are the best kinds of hits that you can get in World of Tanks. But what you can see clearly on right now is that our team in the south is losing quite a lot of vehicles, and they're going to be overrun in a very short period of time. And now my idea here is I wanted to help push the T-28 and the T-34-2, but it turns out that I thought better of it and go back to help out the team. Now you can see that this is a little bit of a bad move by me. I should have gone to the bush at C0 way earlier, because this tank actually has the mobility to get back in time. But now I realize that we're not going to be able to hold the position there and help our team. So what I'm going to be doing right now is something that you cannot really do with other tanks except for the WZ-120 GFT. This tank is very, very small, at least in height. It's a small profile tank that can hide behind ridgelines very, very easily, and it can pop up and shoot at targets. There's also another thing that is very nice about this tank. The camo values are quite decent. Now, as you can see, 6 degrees of gun depression, they're not the world, but they will allow me to actually engage these tanks. I am quite a bit limited by the 10 degrees on the gun arc to the left and the right. So 20 degrees swiveling the tank or the gun from left to right, that's like the max that you have. And that's a little bit of a problem. But what is really nice, and what you can't really see because there is no ticker right there, is the rate of fire. Because right now we're trying to hold this corner, and we're the tank that is furthest up front, hoping to spot the tanks that are trying to push further into our base. You can see the Lansen C right there drives against the wall. I do manage to hit him, but it's another shot, no damage. Another critical hit, but no damage, unfortunately for us. But because you have this very nice gun, which is very reliable most of the time, you are going to be able to do a lot of damage in this scenario. Now, you can see that the armor on this tank will actually shine in just a second. Now, right here in this position, this Nansen C and the Centurion 5-1, they both want me dead, and they are both starting to shoot gold, and it's quite difficult to actually knock out my tank by hitting the upper plate. It's quite nicely angled, and in this position right now, the Centurion 5-1, he has to expose himself way too much with the Lansen C to be able to get some shots off at me. So I'm hoping that my team at the back is going to be able to help me out so that we can stay alive, keep these guys in check, and hopefully win this flank so we can clean up from behind. Because right now, it's all about survival. The Lansen C bounces off again, showing off the amazing armor profile for a tank destroyer of this stature. Once again, where we bounce a very nice AP shell or APCR shell on the almost on the corner to our lower plate. Now, you don't have a lot of HP. 1100 HP is not a lot, and it's basically what you get when you're playing a tank destroyer. Something you have to get used to, but you can see in like an emergency like this, where you're going up against tier 8 opponents, and these medium tanks are not bad tanks. They're like the premium penetration on the Centurion 5-1 is above, what is it? I think it's 260 millimeters of penetration, so it isn't that bad. The rate of fire is certainly one of the key reasons why this tank is so good. The DPM is amazing with this tank. You have above 3000 DPM and 3300 or 400, I think. The accuracy is there. The biggest downside, unfortunately, to the gun is the very long aim time, but you can work with that usually if you have a little bit of patience, and that makes it very flexible. On top of that, a little bit of mobility, well, decent enough mobility to get you from point A to B, and add on top of that a little bit of armor, you can actually have a very strong little tier 8 tank destroyer that can perform very, very well against equal tier opponents and even against tier 9 and tier 10 vehicles. Now, you do not get the 260 millimeters of penetration you have on the APCR shells from the AMX 105 that we are also going to be reviewing, but you do have 248 millimeters of penetration, which is decent enough and I think will work in most situations. Now, if you do not have enough penetration with 248, you can always resort back to the 310 millimeters of penetration with the heat shield, and you're going to be able to probably penetrate most of the tanks. Now, this is a very interesting kind of turnaround. We have managed to hold the base, and it looks like we were about to win when all of a sudden we just lost 2 tanks, and now it's down to 4 versus 3. It's a very peculiar situation where we have to be very careful with what we do. I only have 134 HP remaining. We know that there's a FCM somewhere back here, a tank that has very good penetration and very high rate of fire, but doesn't have any armor. So if we run into him, we might bounce him, but he does have the advantage in HP because he's still full HP. At least if we hit tab, we should see that. Now the issue is our team cannot move further because a Vipera is sitting somewhere over here. But the Vipera is going to be making one very big mistake, because he's driving away. I have no idea why, but the Vipera is driving away, and I managed to put a very big shot into him, killing him. And, I'm not the only one who shot him, but somebody else hit him first, and we managed to knock out the Vipera, making this now a 4 versus 2 situation. Now, this is the moment where I'm scared of finding the FCM 50T running into him. So I am waiting right now, and I'm asking where the FCM 50T is. If somebody saw him last. I know that he is somewhere at E0, but that's probably no longer accurate. So I'm expecting him to be more closely to H9. And we actually do spot him right there. So the FCM 50T gets lit up. He doesn't see us though. So right now I know if I can get my tank onto this ridgeline, I can actually kill the 122 TM. I just have to get a shot off. The FCM 50T sees me. I don't want to overextend too much because I know he's going to be just waiting for me to make a mistake. And, sometimes even the Chinese tanks have a little bit of guidance from Mao, because I take my lucky shot right there and we actually do hit the 122 TM, knocking him out of the game. And now we're just waiting for the FCM 50T to actually make a move. Turns out he's probably going to be flanking us at H9, coming around the corner. So I'm turning around and I do spot him. I don't spot him. The Udis actually does spot him first. So now the Udis puts some shots into him, and now we have a perfect opportunity to put our DPM to good use. I should have loaded high explosive probably right here, because hitting the upper deck of a FCM 50T is probably not the hardest thing to do, but we don't even have to resort to that because our Udis 14-5 knocks him out with a clean shot, making this a very lucrative game for us. We didn't fire a single heat shell. We managed to do 3,145 damage, and we got 1,859 assistance damage in this match as well. So you can see the armor profile actually is not a lie. The angling that you have on this armor is quite decent. So the 120 millimeters of armor at the front get increased by quite a margin. So it's probably more to maybe almost 200 millimeters of effective armor at the front. The Centurion 5-1 did manage to pen us twice, I think, with his APCR shells. Once up here and once down here. This is just the thing that it's really important to keep your enemies at the front, basically like a claymore, and it's going to work out in your favor most of the time. Now, as I already mentioned, the armor is not something you should completely rely on, because in the end it's still a tank destroyer that has 120 millimeters of armor at the front, but the lower plate is going to be a very big weak spot. You have to find those little ridge lines where you can actually hide the lower plate, and then you can actually do work quite nicely. Now, with heat, you're going to have a bit of a bigger problem. If the enemy tanks were firing heat, like the Alpine Tiger could have been doing, we probably would have died quite early on. But I'd say without further ado, let's go to another game just to see what damage you can do with this tank with its main gun, because I think the main gun is probably the star of the WZ-121 GFT. Okay, so the second match I did skip a little bit because there's nothing happening so far and I don't want to waste your time. We're playing on the new map, Outpost. I actually like this map quite a bit. There is a very big little castle system in the middle, You have a little bit of a fishing town up north, and then you have a lot of wide open spaces in the south. There is a little bit of water in it, so it's a bit difficult. Some of these places you can't really play, but in the end, I still think there's a little bit for everyone out there, and I actually like the design of the map, and I think Wargaming have done a decent job balancing the map out as well. There's one little thing that I do dislike a little bit, and that is that the south spawn right now I think has a little bit of a better way to deal with anyone coming in from the north. And if they would add a little bit more cover to it, to the northwest for the enemy tanks to hide behind, I think this map would be pretty damn nice. But we still have to see what we can do. We just lost the Object 260. You can see this is a tier 10 match, and we want to see what this tank can do at tier 10. Do you have to sling gold all the time, or do the 248mm of penetration actually work in your favor? And I think this question will probably be answered in this gameplay. You can see we are in a sniping position. This Leopard Prototype A right behind us is a very nice skin. Just noticed that right here. But we're going up against the Minotauro. We're going up against the tier 9 Italian tank destroyer. They have an Object 279E, and it's not looking good for us. They have finished off our Object 260 in the north, and now it's all about defending the remaining places that we have. We are kind of pushed back into the middle, but the middle is such an essential part of this map that you can actually control quite a bit of territory with it. So we have tanks in the south that have done a quite surprisingly good job at pushing the Progetto 46 and also pushing the Kunzenpanzer out of there. And now we're trying to just hold the north from the Object 279E and the T10. Now, the issue right here is just we're not really able to get a lot of shots off. We don't want to expose ourselves too much. We don't want to be too aggressive because we are a tier 8 in a tier 10 match. But at the same time, we don't want to just sit around and do nothing because we still want to have a little bit of an impact. So I do move on over here. I see a Stritzwagen S1 and I do get lit up. So somebody must be sitting in the middle of the map. And in just a second, you'll see somebody light up, and it's the Bourrasque. And the Bourrasque is right there for the taking. Now, unfortunately, the gun handling on this vehicle is a bit special. The aim time is quite atrocious if you compare it to some other tier 8 tank destroyers that have no real turret. But at the end, I still think that it's fine enough for you to engage these targets if you have a bit more patience. Now we have the tier 9 Italian tank destroyer who only has eyes for the 60 TP who's right next to us, but we are now actually able to get right on to business. Now, if you have trouble penetrating this tank, keep in mind that the track and the hull, they do actually have a pretty big weak spot, and it's right where the track aligns with the hull, and you can just shoot right through the tank. I'm not sure if you can do it with every single caliber, but at least with a 122mm gun, you should be able to overmatch the side armor and go through a lot of the times if you manage to hit that spot. This CC doesn't really care. He just sits there, he takes it, and we farm him for what is worth it. So the game actually has turned into quite a bit of well, a cleanup for us. It isn't a total blowout, but they actually did do quite badly with the north push. They weren't able to capitalize off of it, and it actually turned out to be more of a catastrophic failure for the enemy team. But we take out the Stritzwagen S1, and I just wanted to show you guys the rate of fire that this tank has, the DPM that it is capable of, because I think this is one of those tier 8 tank destroyers that can just do so much damage in a short amount of time when you're like a little bit of a support element. Now, I don't think that the WZ-120 GFT is a very good push tank that, you know, breaches front lines by itself. I think it'll always need a little bit of support. But even the Object 279E, if you're a bit smart, you can, you know, hit the tank and do damage by hitting the side and the weak spot. Unfortunately, a second shell right there, we aren't able to do it. So I'm just waiting for the Object 279E to give us a little bit of a nice side shot there again to finish him off, giving us a grand total of 3,504 damage dealt and 620 assisted. 3 kills. we have been able to do in this time. And I just think it's quite interesting to see that even with 248 millimeters of penetration, you shouldn't be too worried about tier 10 tanks if you do have a little bit of idea of the weak spots and the places where you can go through. Majority of the tanks you don't have to aim too much, and a majority of other tanks you will have pretty good chances if you switch over to 310 millimeters of penetration with the heat shells. Now, I don't really use the heat shells often. I do always carry 10 of them, but I don't really use them often, and I think that's probably a very good feature for a premium tier 8 tank destroyer. So let us take a moment in time and review this little vehicle. Unfortunately, I don't have the mod installed again because of a patch where I can actually go into free cam mode. Now, the WZ-120 GFT is a pretty damn good tier 8 tank destroyer. I think there is no doubt about it. This tank is very good because of its 122mm gun. It is very flexible in terms of having heat shells that have 310mm of penetration or AP shells with 248mm of penetration. It is very good in terms of gun handling most of the time. At least if you do not want to have a very quick aim time, this tank is fairly decent. The accuracy is decent enough if you use the right equipment, as I mentioned prior. The armor is fairly decent. The armor is fairly nice. It's not the strongest armor on a tank destroyer, but it's fairly strong for a tier 8 tank destroyer without a turret. Then the mobility is great as well. The view range is not the best, but I think you can compensate it with just using the right equipment. You may be using premium consumables as well. And I think this is a very good credit making machine. So if you were ever thinking about getting a premium tank destroyer for the Chinese tech tree, which, you know, the Chinese tank destroyer tech tree is not that interesting for me, at least. Didn't really enjoy it as much as I enjoyed some other tank destroyer tech trees. You can probably be sure that this is a decent alternative, a decent premium tank. Now, as I mentioned, I've been very vocal, very critical of World of Tanks, been very critical of wargaming, and I will not be buying more premium tanks. That's what I've mentioned, what I've said, and I will keep to that promise because I just don't think that World of Tanks and wargaming kind of deserve my money at the moment. But this is just kind of for archiving purposes. I have these tanks, I've bought them a long time ago. I'm going to be reviewing them all, and I'm going to give you guys tips if you still are interested in buying some of them. Because I don't know, there still might be players who are interested, and if you want to play this game, and if you want to have a premium tank, you want to buy them, all I can do is I can inform you, I can give you the ideas, I can tell you if these tanks are good, if they're worth your money, and by that I can give you a little bit of an option. If it turns out it's not a very good tank, you will have some kind of warning. If it's a very good tank, you don't have to worry too much if you buy it. In the end, it's your kind of money, it's your decision. I do not have any impact on the decision. I can only help guide you in terms of which tanks are decent, which tanks are not decent. And as always, I do not take any kind of, I do not take, I don't claim to be the only person who reviews tanks and knows anything about tanks. There are other opinions out there. Some people have different opinions, and it's all great. So if you want to know, look or watch different videos, and then compile it together and make a decision based off that information. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this review. I'll see you guys on the next one. Coming up, either we have already done the AMX review or it's coming up right now. And then afterwards, we're probably going to go into the Italian tank destroyers and reviewing the Italian tank destroyers first.